This is Rob Bell, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John and Pete.
Yes.
Love it.
Very, very true. We have the privilege, the honor, the pleasure of
I can't wait.
having pastor, author, harbinger of love, Rob Bell,
Harbinger of love.
here with us. We're in Hill Dog Productions, Hilliard Guest Studio, where he records typically the Screenwriter's Rant Room, but he was kind enough to host us for this very auspicious event with Rob Bell. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be with you guys.
You have such a tremendous and wonderful story, and I'm a huge fan. And my huge fandom comes from I love your message of love.
Good.
I'm going to ask you some tough questions today because not Martin Bashir tough questions, who I typically enjoy, but man,
Fuck that guy.
what line of questioning?
That wasn't as a guy that asks questions for a living in a very hostile sense. As soon as I heard him giving you those bullshit closed questions, I'm like, what is he trying to do? Is he interrogating you or is he interviewing you? Because that's just bullshit.
Well, there's a question that comes out of a sense of wonder and discovery. Like, let's all learn together. Like, what are you saying? What are the implications of this? Where does this lead? And then there's a question that's actually just a statement,
Yeah,
which shuts everything down. It, like, energetically, it closes everything up.
absolutely. And that interview was full of those questions. So, Martin, I typically do like you, man, and I watch your stuff all the time, but I did not enjoy your Rob Bell interview, Martin Bashir. Anyway, however,
Funny.
I will say this. As much as I love and appreciate your message of love, I personally have struggled most of my life with faith and often identify myself as an agnostic.
Yeah.
And when Pete said, hey, we're going to talk with Rob Bell, I went, oh, yeah. Oh, no. What are we going to talk about?
Here comes a collision.
I'm just going to have to bring my conflict and put it out on the table and say, all right, where do we go from here? Because my problem is I'm originally from Guam, which was a Spanish colony, and we were converted at Sword Point. And I have a hard time with the church's role in control. And even though I know that in much of humanity, control was necessary for people to continue and learn to live with each other, I have a hard time with it. So, what do you say?
I say that's 100% normal, and I actually think it's healthy. And any faith that doesn't have room for doubt isn't any authentic or vital faith. So I begin with doubt and faith not as opposites in conflict, but as dance partners. Doubt,
Wow.
your struggle, your wonder, your like, maybe we're all ultimately screwed.
Yeah.
If that isn't part of the whole thing, then we're just wasting our time. So I don't see them as opposites, and I see your authentic, I really struggle with this. First off, the Bible is a story of Israel, and the word Israel in Hebrew means struggle.
Wow.
So first and foremost, like if you read through the scriptures, it's a story of struggle, and it's a story of presence and absence. And one of my favorite lines, which you don't hear preached a lot, is that in the Gospels there's a story about Jesus after his resurrection. Where you are in something like that, what's fascinating to me is after his resurrection, the writer says, some of Jesus' followers worshipped and some of them doubted. Now, if you're trying to tell a story to convince people that they really should have faith, why do
That's
you
not the time.
Why do you
Right.
include? This is crap propaganda.
Yeah.
If your goal is to try to make a case, why do you include, oh yeah, a bunch of the people who were closest to Jesus at the end, post the sort of zenith of the whole thing, we're like, I don't know. The actual Greek there means they stood at a distance. Like they had trouble buying it. So it's interesting to me, at least the tradition I come out of, is that doubt, standing at a distance, questions are all not something that's an antithesis to the thing, but they're actually part of it.
Fair enough.
So when you're like, I have a hard time with that, how do you see Syrian refugees, that guy in Ohio who kidnaps those girls and keeps them in his attic for 10 years,
Yeah.
how do you see that and not
Doubt.
cry out, let alone things that have actually been done in the name of religion or God or Jesus or whatever. If you don't rage against that, something's wrong. Like, yeah, so, of course.
Okay, so something's wrong, but what? I just have a hard time reconciling that. Not just that there are bad things that happen, but just that we're not all dust. Because I think the other side of it is, okay, let me suspend my disbelief, and I don't want that to sound cavalier, but let me suspend my disbelief for a moment and go on the ride with you. How arrogant are we to think that we can attach this story to God and
right,
and understand
like,
what it is
he's
trying
that?
to
right. Well, first off, there will always be whatever you know will be held in tension with what you don't know. Whatever certainty will have mystery with it. So anytime anybody is too arrogant, too confident, too certain, little alarms go off.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a built-in humility to the whole thing. I begin with that. And I begin with however your mental furniture is arranged. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Belief, Gnostic, whatever categories people use. The much more interesting thing is, what kind of world are we going to make? Like, what are we going to do with our time here? And something within you, when you see somebody use their power to help the powerless, when you see somebody use whatever talent, passion, resources they have to give a gift to the world, something within you says that's good. So whatever we're going to say about God, I would imagine there's something deep in your heart that resonates with certain things that you see.
Sure.
And something within you says, okay, that's good for the world.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a better kind of world. That's the kind of world I'd like to live in.
Yes.
So sometimes it's important to rescue the faith conversation from an intellectual arranging your mental furniture in different ways, because that's endless. But if you move to, well, we both know that when you use your power to manipulate and oppress people,
that's bad.
I want to go the other way.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me how many faith expressions go to, well, how are we going to live? How are we going to conduct ourselves? How are we going to use our power?
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do today? And that's just a much, to me, more invigorating conversation. Because this guy's God and that person's belief system and that person's, you're arguing about the infinite.
Yeah.
There's even this great passage in the Torah, the first 5 books that are sort of central to the Jewish tradition, where Moses is interacting with the divine, and the divine keeps insisting that the divine has no edges or boundaries, which is essentially like, you cannot ultimately understand or control me. So you see early in the scriptures, the reason why this story is different is this divine keeps insisting, I will not be manipulated, I will not be controlled, I will not be put in a box.
To a certain degree, I will remain a mystery.
Absolutely.
I refuse to be completely understood.
Yeah, and even when Jesus is asked about spirit, he says, oh, it's like the wind. Oh, great.
Thanks.
That narrowed it down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the wind of all the images. Wind.
Yeah.
And so, like what you and where your ancestors come from, you experienced a brutal, dehumanizing misuse of power. Conversion at the end of a sword should not be called conversion.
Right.
It should be called coercive military oppression.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do with the heart. You know what I mean? The transformation of your heart into a wider, more compassionate, generous person. So a lot of things that were done in the name of the church or God or Jesus were actually anti-Christ.
Okay.
Yeah. So we should just call it what it is.
Yeah. All right. Well, show's over.
Thanks,
everybody.
I got some questions.
No. Yeah. Well, I also want to say though that now that you've put it that way, I mean, you sort of spun my problem around on me, because you're right. That's how it works. If it works. Now, I've always thought of, well, religion is a tool of control. And I have, like I said, I've always thought it as a necessary tool of control. I mean, there were eras in our humanity where we needed controlling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We needed to be taught to behave, and part of it was finger wagging, and you will go to hell if you behave that way. And some people needed that. But if we categorize that as, well, that's okay. Let's set that aside for a moment and talk about the message of compassion and talk about the message of what is right.
Yes.
And why we feel what is right. And what we've done is put some parameters that we can relate to around the feeling of what is right. Am I?
Yeah, exactly. And essentially, one way to think about it is faith traditions are in some ways naming systems. You are naming the infinite.
Okay.
You are trying to give language to it.
Mm-hmm.
So take the practice of baptism. Underneath baptism is this question: can you get a fresh start? Can you be cleansed? Because everybody has regrets. Everybody has things in their past. They're like, man, I would love some.
I wish I could take that one back.
Like I could move forward into new. So for literally thousands of years across all sorts of traditions, people have had this sense that water is like literally cleansing, but also is like cleansing for the soul. So no wonder people have developed rites and rituals involving water.
Right.
So one of the things to do with any religious thing is try to trace back what's the human impulse or what's the question or longing that was trying to address.
Uh-huh.
And so if you think about it as a naming system, this is trying to name that human experience.
Right.
And some naming systems are better than others.
I already have 3 conversations going in my head that I'm trying to have.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah. So you talked, I'm going to go back a little bit in time. You talked about the furniture in people's brains. And I think when I go overseas and I talk to villagers and whatnot and the military, because I've got to deal with both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the infrastructure of the mind.
Yes.
And some people, their floor plan is not going to be changed by me. And that could be the military. That could be the radical guys that are trying to blow people up. But it's those people in the middle that will allow you to move the couch around or everything. But I can't change their floor plan from my point of view for what I do. I can't change their floor plan until I know what kind of furniture they have, what their layout looks like.
Yeah.
It seems to me that people who are faith guides, for lack of a, non-denominational term, do they have a knack for the same kind of thing where they're able to kind of help people who have movable furniture find a way to put it together?
I think it's you learn to ask questions to find what's the thing here. Mm-hmm. So these people over here, they're hungry. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So whoever offers them food,
right?
Whatever ideology is attached to the food will probably get its hooks in them.
Mm-hmm.
So and then sometimes you are at a present stage. We generally don't move to later stages of consciousness without pain, loss, or heartbreak, or we experience something that our previous current categories and labels no longer work. So this person over here was taught that all Muslims are violent. Then a Muslim moves in next door and they're like, this guy's the best neighbor I've ever had.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now suddenly the previous system of categories and labels doesn't
don't
work.
Apply.
And so the growth and the expanded consciousness comes through a disruption. So that's actually how we
As
grow.
things often do.
So if I would go back in your story and ask, what are the moments that most open you up, altered the trajectory of your life? You probably wouldn't say, well, one time I got a pickup.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We went to the mall. You know what I mean? You'd probably say, so-and-so, I got cancer. I lost my job. I got fired, whatever. Whatever it is, in my experience, generally it's a disruption that the upheaval is what instigates, I can't go back.
Right.
And the second thing about growth is once you see, you can't unsee.
Mm-hmm.
Once you taste, you can't untaste.
Yeah.
So you suddenly realize, I don't think building walls has been a good idea in human history.
Mm-hmm.
You once you taste, once you see, you can't go back.
This is, and I'm going to get all Dennis Miller here and throw out some religious names to get your Wikipedia ready. But when you talk about John Knox, Calvin, all those guys,
Sure.
when they saw it, they're like, wait a minute, I actually read the book in the actual Hebrew and Greek. We need to do an accounting. And then the church is like, why don't you come on down to Rome and we'll do some counting? And you're like, no, thanks. We're going to do our counting right. But that's that. You can't, truth to power. I've seen what the words are, and you can't explain these words away because this is not, you guys aren't being legitimate. They can't unsee that. Their faith wasn't broken, but they broke away from Catholicism.
Yeah. Yeah, and generally, all movements forward in any area will involve some questioning and disruption of whatever is the current code, law, rule, way of doing things.
Can we go back to you? I just feel like I wanted that tug of war to last a lot longer than it did.
Let's go.
I mean, that's the thing is, you just sort of took away thank you for that. I mean, I really appreciate it because it's not that I struggled with trying to identify goodness. It's that I struggled with why is there, and like you said, I'm sure this is everybody's struggle. Why is there all this bad?
Yeah.
And all this bad in the name of what we say is good.
Yeah. And a couple thoughts, like all that bad in the name of religion. If you look at human beings and the institutions we create, government, education, business, religion, it's important to remember that we have the ability to muck up pretty much all institutions.
We're pretty good at it.
So when I hear people like the church bashing has its play, I mean, when people critique church or religion, I'm like, yes, absolutely. You probably haven't gone far enough. But remember Wall Street greed.
Sure. Government corruption.
Urban
all over
public
the place.
schools.
Right.
That aren't giving kids what they need to make it in the world.
Yep.
We as
the
human
water
beings
in Flint.
we have this tremendous ability to jack up pretty much any institution. And we've been able to do that for a long time.
Well, can I ask you, for our listeners who are a little less familiar, you were the founder of Mars Hill Bible Church in Granville, Michigan. And then at some point you decided you didn't want to lead that congregation anymore. What happened?
Yeah, I was in a band in college, and we were going to be like the next great band, and then we broke up because everybody had to get jobs.
Yeah.
Pretty standard arc.
That's terrible.
And around that time, I'd preached a sermon. I'd volunteered to preach a sermon, and I was like, this is like an art form that's been lost in our culture.
Wow.
Like for many people, the sermon is, raises the question, what's for lunch? It was just boring. Or the sermon was a political tool, or the sermon was how you convince people to give money to build bigger buildings.
Yeah.
Or it was just pure propaganda. Tell people what they already believe so they believe they're right and everybody else is wrong. But I was like, this is like Martin Luther King, I have a dream. Like the sermon is like this ancient, provocative, beautiful, healing, subversive art form. Mm-hmm. So I was literally set out to try and reclaim the sermon as an art form for everybody, not as for like sort of one religion, but this is for everybody. And then when I was in my 20s, we started this church. My wife and I and some friends, we had literally like a giant art project. Like, what could you do if you did this differently so that anybody would feel welcome, so right away we were like, let's give most of the offering away to the poor, the people who need it more than us. Let's write our own music.
Let me inform our listeners. The church became enormous.
Yeah, it was like
massive.
2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000.
Wow.
We took over a mall.
Wow.
And gutted the anchor store at one end and made an in the round meeting room. It was like 3,500 people in the round.
Wow.
So then I had to give the same sermon 3 times to fit everybody.
No
we
kidding.
would do stuff like, let's start a microfinance bank in Burundi, the world's poorest economy. Let's everybody this Sunday on the spot. Who has change? What change do you have in your pockets? I remember one Sunday people had $250,000 in change in their pockets when we filled it in buckets.
Wow.
So it was like this. What could a collective good look like if you had a group of people who were like, we picked an urban elementary school and said, let's try to get every kid in that school matched up with a reading mentor. It was fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I did. And then I would do these sermons that I was like saying
Well,
stuff
let me
on
back
fire
up because
okay.
you have a absolutely charismatic presence. All of those things make sense. Did you, before you founded the church, you study theology?
I went and did a master's in divinity.
Okay.
So I did like an undergraduate degree in psychology, and then I went and did a 3-year Master's of Divinity degree. And
So should we get deep into the X of Jesus? Let's do it.
Yeah. And like, then that's sort of your basic pastor training.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I did 3 years as an intern. I mean, I was probably mid-20s. This was the early 90s, and I was doing funerals for people who died of AIDS, which was sort of a new thing then, and visiting people in maximum security prison and I was doing all that stuff. Like the ICU unit at the hospital, funerals, you name it.
Wow.
I sort of cut my teeth on like
The heavy
classic pastor work.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
You rolled up your sleeves and started digging.
Oh, yeah, and I remember, like, I did a funeral where the dad, just before he died, rewrote his will so that everybody at the funeral would be angry with everybody else. Because he knew if I give this person this and this person this, he
They'll both be
wanted
mad
his
at it.
funeral to be the most contentious, anger-filled experience for everybody. Like
Your host, Rob Bell.
Oh, yeah. I would do like a funeral. I mean, I did a funeral where the long-lost son who hadn't talked to the dad for years, dad has died, shows up at the funeral home for the planning meeting, in the middle of the planning meeting, and the family is saying to me, do not let him in the room. Oh, yeah. This is incredible.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's get back to the guy who changed his will to make everybody mad at each other. I'm going to call him Hal. But I want to step away for just
Hal
a moment
the
before we
Contentious.
really talk about Hal the Contentious. Now, going back, though, to the church, as you start doing all these terrific things and raising money for all these great things that you just sort of, everybody just goes on the ride with you, and it sounds terrific.
Yeah.
And I could see why that church grows, because you feed that sense of goodness, and everybody has a mission. I wonder what my mission will be this weekend.
Yeah.
What happened?
Oh, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Part of the thing about like a local church is you have these people, is what I was doing. I began writing books. You start to have people are like, okay, that thing that you're doing there, we want to do that here. And you start feeling the sense that we should spread this around.
Yeah. You got to write the manual.
And then people, yeah, exactly. One of the interesting things about a church is that institutions always bend towards self-preservation.
Right.
And I knew my work was to go into all the places where people who would never go to a church would be and talk about these things. It's almost like the thing was like, it just wanted to explode and go. And so then I just gradually, it happened actually very quickly, was like, oh, you've done this. There was a specific moment, because when you start something, you carry it on your shoulders.
Yeah.
You sort of bear it in your being. And there was a couple of events where it was like this feeling of, good job. You did it. That was a great season. Now you got to keep going. In our culture, we don't do well with seasons. If the sitcom is funny for 5 seasons, then we make 7.
Right.
And then what could have been a graduation becomes a divorce.
Yes.
How many people I know, and you ask them, like, that thing that sort of blew up at the end, was there a moment earlier when you should have left? People are like, oh, absolutely. I was just comfortable and I didn't. We don't know. Oftentimes people don't know how to leave things when everything's going fine, even though that season is ending. And I had that sense, like, this is great. This has been amazing. And now you got to keep going.
Yeah.
And you got to go into all sorts of places. There's a lot of people who never, like a Christian megachurch pastor, trust me, the number of parties where that kills. You can just see the person like, I'm going back to the bar. Like, what am I going to talk about with this guy? And I just kept noticing how many people from all sorts of backgrounds were coming to the church. And it was like, well, could you take it farther?
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete Turner.
And if you like the show,
Do us a favor.
share it.
That's the biggest thing, honestly.
All your social media outlets, all your friends, let them know the ones that you like.
Yeah. I mean, we make this show for you guys. If you think it's great, say so. Say so by sharing it. Say so by putting a comment in after the show.
Also, if you go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts, give us a rating. Give us a review. If you think the show is great, please give us 5 stars and say so. And if you think the show really sucks, please give us 5 stars and say so.
Because, heck, we're listening.
That's right.
You can't be more approachable than us. We want to make the show better. If there's something that we're missing, let us know. Yeah, that really is how you help us.
That's right. Tell us all about it. Thanks for listening.
And now, back to the show.
like I do a show here at Largo in West Hollywood, this comedy club. And I create space, like I'm doing this tour right now where we create a pop-up inside a club or an art gallery. We bring in chairs and put them in the round and make like a pop-up living room for a couple hundred people. And then I do a day where I'll talk and people ask questions. It's fantastic.
Really?
Yeah, all the time. That's a tour I'm doing right now, yeah.
And you do that and just invite all comers.
Oh, it's, you wouldn't believe who comes. And I'll talk about all this. I'll
Who
talk
comes?
about suffering, doubt. Oh, like,
Because I
Minneapolis.
would have brought all my doubt and dumped it right on.
Oh, awesome. Oh, yeah. Literally 2 weeks ago in Minneapolis, an hour, it's an all day, this tour right now is like 10 to 6 all day. I go 8 hours on a Saturday.
Wow.
1 hour in, dude raises his hand. He says, I'm from a small town in North Dakota and I'm a junior high math teacher. And then he chokes up and he says, we've had this rash of kids killing themselves in our small town and none of us can figure out why. And it's killing me and I gotta do something about it. What should I do? Like, that's the kind of stuff people, or a woman's,
what was your advice to that?
I said to him, well, first off, suicide's incredibly complicated, so let's just start there. But I said, I would imagine a kid ends their life because they're in great pain. And I imagine what happens when you're a kid and you're in great pain and you say something about your pain is you're filled with a world of adults and parents and teachers and authority figures
who ignore the pain.
Probably immediately want to fix you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you tell me you're in pain, and my first response is, well, here are three things you could do to fix it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want this tension. I want to resolve the tension. You say you're in great pain, and I say, well, here's a book you could read and 3 things you should do. What I've just said to you is do more.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually the first thing
and
with
I
pain,
might be overwhelmed.
Yeah, all I've sent to you is, basically it's your problem, you need to do more.
You haven't tried hard enough.
And that actually the thing about pain is first and foremost, suffering needs to be given expression. Pain needs to be given expression, which is why Smells Like Teen Spirit is such a great song. It's Kurt Cobain. Like you think through how many times art gave expression to that which is beyond words.
Yeah.
So I said to this guy, how many situations are kids in where they can give expression to their pain that they won't immediately be given all sorts of, here's what you need to do to fix
dismissal,
it. Which is more like
essentially.
parents' anxiety and anything else. So I said, what if you could create spaces where kids, is it some old barn where they can write whatever they want on the walls? Do you have a ritual involving bonfire where they can write down all their pain and make the biggest, like what could you do in this town as a space that hasn't already been co-opted by sports, academics, religion, their parents? Is there some zone that
can still be theirs?
What could you create? I'm just making this up on the spot with this guy in front of 300 people, but that's what happens. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. And that's the really interesting thing to me is to do a public space that is blatantly spiritual and yet hasn't already been co-opted by, thank you for coming. If you'll please fill out the card at the end.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Like
it's
us on
this whole
Facebook.
thing was like a get up for some other thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Man.
Look at you.
Wow, and
this
man.
is not going how you thought
no,
it was.
This is the he
not
can
going
never.
on.
He always has words, and he had wow and man, and those are just placeholders.
This is another thing about faith and doubt, going back to your earlier questions. For so many people, it was about, let's fix the thing. Here are the 3 truths you need. But to me, it's about the full spectrum of humanity. So you enter into the whole thing. And any God worth even discussing has to be a divine presence present in all of it. And for many people, the whole thing was given to them as a binary. There's good and there's bad.
Yeah.
And whatever sort of spiritual view they were given, just stay over here and we don't
good.
quite know what to do with this.
Don't do bad.
But I simply understand it as much more, they call it a non-dual awareness, a presence in all of it. Something moving you, guiding you, pulling you, even in your rage, your doubt, your anguish, your loss, disappointment. That's just much more interesting.
And much more dynamic and much more human.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now I'm not trying to sell you anything. Let's just enter into it together and see what's happening in it. Who knows what we'll see?
Wow.
There's so many parallels with what you're talking about, with the things. And you know, I come from a world of people getting torn apart with bombs
Yeah.
on both sides. You
Yeah.
talked about seasons, a commander, and you have to have felt this. a commander has to be very careful of what they say,
Yeah.
the influence they create.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of byproduct influence where, like, if by spending more time with Pete, because Pete becomes influential to the commander, that creates doubt and jealousy and contempt towards Pete, towards the commander, towards the mission. You know, and people are like, you know, you're losing
all those
the way.
dynamics going
right?
on.
Yeah, and it's like and so what's great for a commander is they have an automatic season. It's like, hey, you're going to be in Iraq for a year, and then when you come back, you're going to make sure you do an inventory, and then you're going to go on to be someone else's staff guy, and the next guy is going to come in, and his season. So it's a controlled amount of time, because I would imagine if you stayed there for a long period of time, you would spend, and I know because commanders have told me this, they would spend a lot more of their time dealing with interpersonal conflict.
Absolutely.
Than on the mission.
And like, there's always that, the sniffing that goes on. Where's the inner circle? Where's the inner circle of power? How many rings out am I? You'll probably find it interesting when I left the church. Everybody got an email on a Thursday saying, Rob and Kristen are leaving us. They're going to do some new work in Los Angeles this Sunday in our services. Rob will tell everybody about it. And so that Sunday, everybody was like,
I didn't go to the church, and I just felt that, what?
Yeah, yeah.
Huh?
And here's what's interesting. So at the beginning of the services, I just walked down front, walked up on the stage. Giant, extended standing ovation. And all they know is I'm leaving them. Which, maybe we should tell me something. And, and what was interesting is there was like the sadness, but like the number of people who lined up to say, you have been talking to us about how you have to keep going.
Yeah.
How you have to keep leaping and risking.
Right.
You're just doing the thing that you've been talking about. And what was so interesting to me is, without knowing anything other than you're leaving, there was just, we love you, go do your thing.
Yeah. Well, you relate it to seasons, and the season was over, and everybody decided you won the championship. So there. And then you moved out here to Los Angeles. What made you pick Los Angeles?
Where do people tell stories?
Well, they tell them here.
Yeah, I think this is always my favorite city.
Yeah.
And this was like, if you're telling a story at some level, what opportunities would there be simply if you were in an environment where people are telling stories?
You know, and it's worked out beautifully for you because your exposure here, I mean, we got to you. I got to you. I certainly was not combing through media for my entertainment, looking for people who were talking about God.
Yeah.
I honestly was not. You know, we met you through our friend Jay Moore.
We love Jay Moore.
Thanks, Jay.
Yes, we do. When I've always been a fan of Jay, as long as he's been out there making people laugh, he's made me laugh. And I certainly didn't come to him looking for answers about God. I wasn't looking for answers at all.
Yeah.
But he talks about his faith.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, here's a guy who has, you know, he wasn't brought up in the Catholic Church.
Right.
He's chosen it for the reasons that he likes.
Yeah.
And he talks about it from that standpoint. And I thought, well, you know what? Okay. That sounds sincere to me. And so, he's got Rob Bell on his show, and Rob Bell was a mega church. I might skip. No, okay, I'll listen to it. And I listened to it, and it was captivating. And I'll tell you what captivated me was not only that he gave you a little tug of war, and you guys talked about some things that were really issues to be debated, but that you brought Scripture. You brought Scripture a metaphor in every sense, where it would be something that was. I've always had a problem with the Bible.
Okay.
Because I thought, you know, as a tool of control, okay, this is great. What do we want people to do? Well, we want people to stop killing folks. Okay, well, let's put in there that you can't kill folks. What else do we want them to do? And you just go down the list. Oh, we don't want them to steal. Okay, well, let's put in there that they shouldn't steal. And then you craft a story around it, and then you hand it to a bunch of monks, and the monks are gonna, they're gonna write it over and over again. But what else do monks do? Well, they gotta kind of keep the monastery growing. I know. Let's cultivate some things. Hey, let's make some wine. So now you've got guys going, well, this is what I think this means 3 languages later, and I'm a little drunk. So I'm going to throw this in there.
Your overview of the Bible. I love it. I love it. Maybe left a few things out, but otherwise really solid.
A few things. Yeah, maybe a couple things. But finally, I was hearing the Bible interpreted by a human being.
Sure.
Who could say, this says this, but here's what my education tells me this has evolved to say, And this is why this means something.
Why did somebody write it down?
Yeah.
Begin with what was happening in the world, and why did somebody find this interesting to write down? And suddenly you have a very different book on your hands.
Man, that context. It's huge.
Yeah.
You
See,
know?
I wasn't far off, right? What do we want people to do? Well, we want people to stop being adulterers. Okay, we'll write that down.
Yeah. When you look at the origins.
I know I'm oversimplifying.
Yeah, but
but-
you're taking
But I feel reinforced.
you're taking a multi-millennial old text,
Right.
and you're trying to explain it. We don't have that much time,
Yeah.
so you got to simplify
Are
it.
you familiar with the Enuma Elish?
No.
Okay, can we do 3 minutes on the Enuma
Do
Elish?
it.
Because I want to watch your head explode.
Okay.
Okay. The ancient Babylon and the Babylonians for a while were the thing. Like the global military superpower for a number of years were the Babylonians.
Mhm.
The Babylonians, like all ancient cultures, had a creation myth. Essentially, how did we get here? And so people would tell stories. We got here because of this.
Yep.
The Babylonians had a creation myth called the Enuma Elish. And the Enuma Elish talked about a battle between Marduk and Tiamat, where there are two gods, a god and a goddess, got in an epic war. And at the climax of the battle, Marduk kills Tiamat, and then he splits her carcass apart. And with her carcass, he makes the heavens and the earth. So average guy on the street in Babylon, the global military superpower of his day, how did we get here? What are we doing here? What's the meaning of it? There was a great battle. Marduk ripped Tiamat's carcass apart. From it made the heavens and the earth. Now, the Jewish people end up conquered. Israel gets conquered by Babylon, and they haul a number of Jews away from Jerusalem to Babylon. So now you have these Jews living in Babylon in this foreign culture that has a creation myth. It's in Babylon that most of the Old Testament was compiled. How does the Old Testament begin? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then how does the Bible begin? It begins with a poem. And the poem is, and then God made this, and then God made that, and it's good, and it's good, and it's good. And the trees produce fruit that produces more trees, that produces more fruit, and it's diverse, and it's fish, and it's this, almost like this overflowing joy. And God's like getting off on creating. And this, and this, and this. Now why is that Genesis 1? Genesis, the Bible does not begin with a science textbook. It begins with a poem, and it's a poem about overflowing joy. Now why is that interesting? Because it's a direct contradiction to the Enuma Elish. Because the Enuma Elish says, why are we here? Violence and destruction.
Right.
Genesis 1 said, we are here because of generative overflowing joy and creativity. Now, if you're a global military superpower and you're going around crushing people who are less powerful than you, which story
What's the stronger message?
helps animate and justify your destruction? So Genesis 1 begins, it's political, it's economic. That poem, to this day, on Wall Street right now, which is the story that animates Wall Street? Violence and destruction and co-opting and manipulating of the powerless, or a generative compassion of abundance for everybody? So that's why, like this book, when people say, well, it's all about this. Wait, no. There is some profound, interesting questions that I would argue are still the fundamental questions of humanity. That's just a different book. Look at him.
I'm not sure I even like this.
Yes.
Why would you do that, Rob? Wow.
Because your sense that it's probably more interesting. It is.
Yeah.
It's way more interesting and actually way more relevant and modern. You just have to realize, of course, there's a bunch of offensive stuff in there. The world was more primitive and brutal 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Why are we surprised?
Okay, that's a really great question. So now we have this book that survived, and now we have a way to preserve words that, there was a lot more opening for accidental evolution in times past because we weren't able to regulate some text on a global level. So it traveled, it evolved, it fit situations, things like that. Now, I think we have a text that says these words and that these words will persevere because we preserve them in digital media. If somebody changes them, we can go, wait. We have version control. That's not what it said. It said this. So now, what do you think about the evolution of faith now that we have the ability to lock down the words?
Well, you'll never stop having new interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
A guy a couple years ago made a new translation of the Bible based from the Greek and Hebrew on how we actually talk now. It's called The Message. It's basically
How is it?
It's fantastic. It's actually really, really beautiful.
Huh.
So you'll never stop having, okay, that word there, we don't really have that phrase anymore.
Right.
So what is the modern equivalent? So
Can
in
you
some
give us an
senses-
example of that?
Oh yeah. In the book of Deuteronomy, there's this phrase. There, in the ancient world, they had a phrase called having an evil eye,
Uh-huh.
which meant you were greedy or stingy. And so the idea was to have a good eye, which meant you were generous.
Okay.
So this had incredible economic implications. And essentially your eye, they talked about how your eye was like a lamp for your whole body. If you're greedy, it will probably affect every area of your life.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a generous view of the world, that greed and generosity are actually about your beliefs. Is the world a world of scarcity, or is the world a place that can provide? But in the Hebrew, the evil eye, we don't have this phrase, evil eye. So most English translations now just say, if you have if you're generous. But if you read it literally, it would say, if you have a good eye or a bad eye.
Right.
So the eye part isn't in some translations.
Yeah.
It just says, if you're generous.
Right.
But part of the eye thing is sort of the poetry or the figure of it.
Yeah, you lose a little bit.
Yeah, so
of
you
the...
lose a little, and somebody probably made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
You know, someone was just like, we don't really have this phrase, so I should probably,
Yeah.
it's all these endless little decisions that somebody made somewhere.
This is the bow of a Maltese boat.
It's got a good eye.
You see that thing?
Wow.
Oh, is that what that is? That
Yeah. And it goes to the
interesting.
evil and good eye thing. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie and say that I know which is which, but you'll find that a lot around the Mediterranean and the Middle East, that symbol. And if it's like a reminder or if it's a guide or a beacon.
Well, if you're a boat laying on someone's shore, I'd want to know that this person is like, I got a good eye here.
Right.
I'm not coming to destroy you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bring abundance and generosity.
Maltese culture is part Italian, part English, like UK English, but also part Arabic.
Yeah.
So they speak all three languages kind of in a mix.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating place. It really is. But you said the eye thing, and I'm like, I know exactly where I've seen that and where it matters. But it isn't like that here, though. Like you said,
we don't really have that phrase.
No.
I always thought when I heard Moses had the good eye that he didn't chase the high fastball.
Oh, I thought it was for the ladies. He had a good eye. Yes, indeed.
So let's go back to Hal.
Remember
we were talking about Hal the contentious?
Oh, yeah,
And how he...
Oh, yeah, I'll never forget that.
Right. What do you do to deal with that? I mean, I think that if Hal is that contentious, he's probably raised some contentious people and he's just planted those seeds all those years and the whole place just kind of catches fire, so to speak.
Yeah.
What do you
then
do
your
when you
job
get
is to
there and you're in
stand
the
up
middle
there
of
and
the...
eulogize him.
Right.
One of the things... Yeah, I'm trying to think with that one, I asked for the good.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me stories.
Boy, that Hal, he sure was crafty, wasn't he?
Right, right. And sometimes you do everything you can to be honoring and respectful, and you just don't fake. First off, you don't fake anything.
Yeah.
So if nobody has anything, you're sort of navigating all of this. This was a human being. Human beings matter. Human beings reflect something of the divine, and you are the kids. And sometimes, actually, the message is already floating around the room because every person there is thinking about their funeral, and they're like, I don't want my funeral to be like this. It's like sometimes almost the lesson is already floating around the room, and all you do is give people the space
Just be the catalyst.
to draw their own conclusions,
Yeah.
and then you go on. I did a funeral years ago for a dude who was very, very hostile to religion.
Uh-huh.
And his very conservative family were always worried about him,
Right.
praying for him, concerned for his soul,
Yes.
because he was very outspoken in his critique. Exactly what you said.
That's how my
the
family
church
feels
that
about me. I'm
that
positive.
landed on the shore
Right.
and exploited. He was always like, that thing is narrow, it's suppressive. He was always very pointed in his critique and wanted nothing to do with all that. And his family was always like, oh man, we're trying to get through to him at his funeral. And he's like a white Dutch guy, all these African American women start showing up. And families in like their Sunday best. And it turns out
I'm
he was
interested in
paying-
where this story is going.
It turns out he had this small business.
Uh-huh.
And he had been making tons and tons of money. He's a very good businessman. And out of the back of that small business, he had been paying people's rent.
Oh, wow.
He had been paying their electricity bills. He had this whole thing going in the inner city of taking care of people all over the place. He just had this ruthless generosity, and he was siphoning all of this money out of his business to float all these different people so they could get by paying groceries. And he dies, and all these people show up who are like, I don't know where we'd be without him.
Wow. And his family sat in stunned silence.
So great.
Trying to save his soul.
I think,
Right.
and the beautiful, to their credit, there was like this beautiful sort of celebration of
We had him all wrong, didn't we?
That guy had this game going on. How great is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great moment.
Where was Contentious Howell's funeral? Like, what state was it in?
I mean, seriously, this is probably 15 years ago. Michigan.
Okay, so my ex-wife, she's from Illinois. We get along great. We're like a family. Right about the time we were getting our divorce, Grandma dies. Right, and this is in Illinois, like I said. So I get nominated as one of the only dudes around to help carry Grandma off and be a pallbearer. So I'm there in support of, but my ex-wife and I, we're not sitting together. I'm on my little side of the chapel. And they start the service. There's like this, the standard thing. They start talking about Grandma. Grandma Rose was this. Grandma Rose was that. And then all of a sudden her sister makes this left turn. And she starts saying, and then she went to the hospital and they took her bones. And like, yeah, it got really weird. And I was like, what? And she was just mad and just seething. All this hate was coming out. And so I do the only thing you can do in this situation where you really don't know anybody. I just kind of lean forward and look down the pew at my ex-wife and we're 15 people apart. And she's looking at me like, I don't know. Like, I thought maybe this was like a Midwestern funeral thing, like an airing of the grievances or something.
Got it.
Because I know their family has really contentious funerals where like, I loved Grandma more than you. You weren't here. And there's
It's
all
like a
this
debate.
Yes, like I did more. You didn't.
I
do
won at
anything.
Grandma's funeral.
Yes, I did this, and I was just like, "This is the craziest funeral I'd ever seen."
Yeah.
I've seen other ridiculous things, but you should write a book about the funeral crap that you see because that's such a hard time. It's not a good representation of who the person is, but it sure is a decent version of the beat up. Like, I don't know what to do with myself because who's good at funerals unless you've been to a bunch of them,
Don't you like
Yeah.
when you appear on someone's podcast and they go, here's the book you should write? And I'm going to agree with Pete. I'd love to
I
see
would
that
love
book. Not because I want to make fun of who won at Grandma's funeral and all
Right.
that stuff, but I think
won
that
at
there
Grandma's
are a pile of lessons there
Oh, absolutely.
that speak to
Absolutely.
the okayness of our mortality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some of the most interesting places for me, I just spoke in a federal prison.
Yeah.
The energy in that place, these dudes, it's like when you're broken,
Mm-hmm.
you're hungry
Mm.
Yeah.
in some way that you aren't on the outside.
Wow.
I'm endlessly discover the most interesting things in the strangest places. Oh yeah. I have friends who are like hospital chaplains that prison chaplain was, or like, don't give me really successful people sitting somewhere, critiquing how things are going. Give me people who are like broken, hurting, crying out, sick. That's where the action is.
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
That's where the action is.
Yeah,
That's
I know
true.
people who have literally just organized their whole lives, social workers,
Yeah.
therapists who are like, no, just get me down in the mess because that's real.
Yeah.
That's real. You can actually help people in a very clear sort of bullshit-free zone.
Wow.
In so many places, it gets more successful, and you get, you get all that pretending.
Well, I think you just described the guy who had all the families show up and say, I don't know what we would have done without him.
Oh, right.
Because rather than talk about
Right.
it and rather than, say whatever line his family was towing, rather than get in line with them, he did it his own way.
Yes.
But he didn't not do it. He did
Right.
it.
He was very busy in this little office in the back of his little business, and people knew he like wanted his hands on the books, and then you find out he's floating all these
Yeah.
people.
Wow.
Beautiful.
I
Beautiful.
found in my experience when you go out, it's the ground truth that matters. You know, we'll
Oh,
come up
right,
with these
right.
big grand schemes on how to fix this problem. And really, if you go out and you listen,
You'd go out walking the neighborhood and find
right,
out.
ask
Oh.
questions, and I would find the most simple things. I'm always big on this with commanders. I'll say, like earth mover, can you move cement? What are these basic logistical things that are already paid for that we can use to benefit them? And when those people say, we need our road packed down, I mean, we know we're not going to get paved, but if you guys could bring your earth mover and smash the dirt down some, that'd be huge. So you make them go through the government. So the government comes to the army and says, give us your earth mover, and it becomes a multiple win. But it didn't cost $1 million. It
You
cost,
already had the equipment there.
the equipment's already there. So now the police get to escort the earth mover. The people went to the government for a solution. When I go talk to the government or people, I'll say, tell me something the government's done for you. Nothing. That guy owes me money. That's what I would get. I don't even know the guy's name. And so if you can get the people to get up, walk over, consume some government, get a return on their investment, we surrender some of our power to that local power. Cause
Yeah.
the one guy I always talk about, the quote is there's not room for two swords in the scabbard. So if we're there to improve people's lives, we can't be in charge. It's got to be that guy's plan.
Yeah.
And so, but that's all based on ground truth. Because if you go up 3 levels up in command, they're like, we're going to build a school out of concrete, paint it blue. It's like, don't do that. That gets people killed around here.
Right.
The ground truth is so different, and so those guys in
Fascinating.
prison, their lives are granular. They don't
Yes.
have these big grand schemes and
Yeah.
plans. They're like, I'm trying to get through the next 25 minutes.
Right.
I'm trying to keep my head together. I've got my head on a swivel. All those things. If you're not granular, you can't help those guys.
Yep.
I want to
Well
shift
said.
gears and talk about another heavy topic that bothers me. I want to talk about gay marriage.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the church's stance on homosexuality and tell you what I think is going to happen, and then you can tell me what you think is going to happen because you know more about these things than I do.
I was going to have your arm behind your head here in a second.
Yeah.
But with love.
I think that at some point, churches, and many churches already have, adopted a policy that says, hey, love is great. Let's have more love. And if you two dudes love each other, great. Just love. That's all. I think that's going to evolve, and our humanity is going to be much more accepting, and I think faith is going to include more and more people. What's taking it so long?
Well, I think you're right. And all growth happens in clicks and small steps.
Mm-hmm.
You look everything from women's rights to care for the environment. Everything takes a while.
Mm.
And so you look over how many ideas that we now accept as totally normal were once radical, brand new ideas.
Yeah.
And
Like what?
well, think about let's go back 2,500 years. People had a cyclical view of history. So what happened to your father happened to his father, happened to his father. You're on a loop. You're on an endless repeating loop.
Uh-huh.
And everything that happened will happen again. And all there is an endless repeating of the same things that have already occurred.
Mm. Yeah,
So
that
the
resonates.
Abraham story,
That was really the way that people felt.
dominant
These
feeling.
things.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, the book of Genesis chapter 12. And then Abraham, go, leave your father's household, go to a new land. And Abraham went. Is actually a brand new idea in human history. You could leave your father's household, leave your father's gods, leave the land, and go
go
somewhere
do
else and
something
do
else.
something new. It's so revolutionary that now we don't even, it's so common to how we think. There's actually a scholar named Thomas Cahill wrote a book called The Gifts of the Jews, which is just a book chronicling things that we all now are totally so obvious and normal part of life that were once brand new ideas in human history.
And one of them was,
Yeah,
go forth, Abraham.
absolutely.
Do what you gotta do.
And Abram went.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right.
3 words that you'd be like, oh, Abram went. Okay, what's the big deal? Oh, no.
Well, what do you mean he went?
Got off the
He
cycle.
got off the cycle.
Yeah, so you have lots of ways that people now, I mean, think about the printing press. Was that 1427?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, an idea can travel as fast as a horse. You can like literally write something down. You can print it out, fold it, because it was the fold that was the big deal, because it could fit in your coat.
Right.
And this idea that we're sharing around, this radical new idea, could be
Can
in that
be in the
town as
next
fast
town.
as a horse. As
Yep.
a horse. Whoa! And you could send horses in every direction. And that one, most technological breakthroughs usher in a whole new era of humanity. In essence, think about that one printing.
And what was
press.
the message that took off? I have my doubts. And it went.
Yeah, so it will, but it's actually happening quicker and quicker and quicker.
Yeah.
So we'll be there. I think we'll be there very shortly, honestly,
You know that
because it's
oh man, this is so great. I love talking to you. This is great. And I'm sorry, I keep going back to my worst stuff, but this is what it's important. When you go to a place like the Middle East,
yeah,
and you say, I'm from the Bell tribe, they're like, oh yeah, that's right. You guys are all a bunch of assholes who steal from people. You know, like their history repeats, and it's out of your control now. You're like, your tribe is known as the goat fuckers or whatever it's going to be. I mean, that's what you are because that history, that
can
cycle
you change it
hasn't broken out there. If you leave,
and come back?
maybe if you come back, you might get killed because it's so unstable. Instability is the norm there. So, you know,
Hey, Pete's back. How you doing with the goats, Pete?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that cycle that you were talking about, that still happens in parts of the world where even if they want to get it, and then you take that and you layer in a fatalistic attitude towards things, and you really get into, you know, I'm not worried about my future because it's, you know,
I've seen it.
yeah, they're not a bunch of Presbyterians or anything, but they're not worried about, like, there's no point in me exerting effort here. So now you have this, not a lethargy, but just a lack of desire. There's no way to break this cycle. It's never been broken in, you know, however many generations.
Wow.
And so then we come in and we don't even have what you said, I've never been trained on as being a reality. It totally changes how I look at these problems now.
Yeah.
And how I might, if I was to go back, how I might talk to people about this. Because when I would interview
That'd be
people,
great for you to show up in Afghanistan and say, "Hey, everybody,
I talked
let me
about
tell
that."
you about what the Jews said we should do."
Well, so the other thing that goes with all of that is I would interview these guys, and we had just liberated all the Iraqis. I would look for their ability to dream. I couldn't find it.
That's heavy.
It wasn't part of their reality.
No imagination.
Yeah, because instability was the norm. So I would
Right.
say, I've got
Yeah.
a bag of money. You can do whatever you want. And they're like, I don't want to go anywhere. I just want my family to be safe.
Yeah.
But that's not a dream.
Yeah, I don't want the money. Somebody's going to come for me if
Yeah.
I take the money.
Or
Yeah.
I'll
No,
go to-
no. Go ahead and dream about it. No.
I'll go to Syria. Like, why Syria? Like, why not Hawaii? Like, that's not possible. You know? And if you're dreaming, if you're just playing a game, why can't you go to Hawaii? Because they can't.
Yeah.
They literally, and it all goes into
Yeah.
that cyclical, you know.
Yeah, and an integral theory, they call it archaic stage of consciousness, which is when your dominant need is safety, security, shelter, and food.
Mm-hmm.
And you start talking about self-actualization, imagination, we are way up the pyramid.
Yeah.
That's a luxury. You know, what do you want to do with your life? What are you talking about? I'm about to get shot.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, this goes to that, and I'm big on this. This goes to the coexist bumper sticker. Go put that in your car in most of the world.
Go drive around with that
Yeah,
hanging off of you.
we're afforded that luxury. We're afforded
Yes.
to discuss
Yeah.
gay rights and
Yeah.
you know,
Diversity's good.
yeah,
is?
diversity's good.
Yeah.
Diversity gets you killed out
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Standing
exactly.
out, get your head chopped
Exactly. And going back to how human growth works, I call it the clicks. You move from A to B, B to C. Rarely do cultures, institutions, tribes, or families skip. Suddenly, it's a long, slow march at a biological level, at a cultural level, at an acceptance level. And when people ask, why is it taking so long? I immediately go, sometimes it helps to go from the macro to the micro. Did you get it overnight? Like, think about your life, and if we were to have a transcript of everything you believed 17 years ago, when we were to go back through all the things that you said, you'd be like, oh yeah, I don't really see it that way anymore.
Right.
Van Halen is the greatest band.
Yes, okay. So think about things from the funny to the profound. Your growth actually has unfolded over a period of years.
Right.
And so we look at American culture and think, why isn't it more accepting? Why can't it speed up? But then we have great judgment about why can't it happen faster? But then when it comes to our own growth, we want all of the grace And we want people to like, take it easy.
Take it
man.
easy.
I'm under construction. I'm a project. So I find that fascinating when we culturally are like, come on, keep up, everybody.
Right.
But then
Internally,
we're like, please give me my time. I'll get there.
wow.
Yeah. Perspective changes all that too, because I bet to other societies and cultures, we're going a million miles an hour.
Oh
know?
yeah, you even in America, some of the things people are talking about that people are, if you've been in a place that has for generations seen the world a particular way,
Mm-hmm.
and now somebody's like, we got to go this way. And you think about how behavior wires your neural pathways in particular ways.
Sure.
Yeah.
You've always done it this way.
Right.
And now I'm like, well, just do it a different way.
Mm.
I am essentially saying to you, rewire yourself physiologically
What
now.
you have learned to survive.
Yes.
Now you want to try to consciously change
Yes.
because somebody's got a great idea.
Yeah, and do it on a path.
Yeah. And then also for a number of people, I've noticed this oftentimes over the years. This person, their parents, teacher, mentor, professors helped them so much.
Mm.
And then you come along and say, this is how it is.
Right.
And it contradicts something. That person's like, wait. Or maybe somebody who struggled with an addiction. I would be dead or face down in a gutter if it wasn't for this person.
Yes.
And this person helped to get me out with these 7 things.
Right.
And you're now telling me that a couple of those things, they were
Aren't what
wrong?
right.
What else? You're like yanking the rug out. Were they wrong on everything? Were they wrong? That can be like traumatic.
Sure.
And that can be rejected instantly. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't presume to change somebody's condition if you don't know who they are, who their friends are.
Right.
Because it matters to them what their friends will think. And
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
one of those people that say, I don't give a damn what they think, but really they do, you know, like I have a solution for you. Well, you know, my uncle taught me this. Yeah. Are you saying my uncle was wrong?
Yeah.
You know, good luck fighting that fight.
Yeah, a friend of mine used to say, after the work, like I'd give a sermon, he'd say, that was awesome. For the people who heard that, the really important thing is the next conversation they have. So they're going to go back to the cubicle.
Right.
They're going to go back home, and whatever those voices are going to have so much power. Because they're going to be like, hey, I heard this thing. It's really making me think. Well, you know, that the second voice has an incredible amount of power.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully the second voices have some sense.
Yep.
Boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I was hoping we get at least one more wow.
Rob, we've had you for an hour. I want to do this as many times as you will let us.
You come back and we'll do it again.
Okay.
Nice. I love it.
And I want to say this word as well. Wow.
He got another one out of it.
Yeah.
I got another
man.
wow.
I'm
You guys
gonna
are
edit
great.
The last one.
I love it.
Can
Love
I
it.
throw one more question at you?
Absolutely.
Do you have time? Okay. So one of the things that I do with when I work overseas, I talk about modern combat, and there's 5 elements to it. The first 4, don't worry about. The 5th one is religion. And we always want to come and either ignore and like, we're afraid of dealing with Islam because it's not, we don't know it. Like your knowledge of the Bible and the things you bring in, we don't have anything like that with our own book, you know, but Islam is different. So we go over there and Islam drives what they do. They don't have a separation of church and state.
Right.
The church is the state. You know, we have a papal visit here. It's a big deal. We've never seen Sistani come here. We've never had a presidential visit to the chiefs of Shia or Sunni. What do we do to gain a greater understanding of the impact of religion on people's lives? It doesn't have to be Islam, but how do we do that to help us improve our ability to better understand, in this case, Islamic people?
Well, I think the first thing, that's a great question. The first thing for many people in lots of places in the world, religion is not going back to, we were talking about how your intellectual furniture is arranged.
Right.
Religion is tribe. It's economics. It's politics. It's how you order your life. And there are elements of that we need as human beings. Like we are social animals. We need each other. And a lot of those religions endured because they held human beings together. They protected you from threats. They educated you. So I think you begin with it's so easy to march in with all this judgment and critique instead of these are human beings.
Right.
And human beings have some pretty basic needs. And human beings have been trying to name the infinite for thousands of years. So, where's there room to move? Where is there any good in here that we can go with? I mean, you know this way more than I do. My observation would just be that people get radicalized because they're vulnerable. That the person who, I don't have any prospects for a job. My kids have no prospects for education. We're hungry and we're not safe. So the person who can provide some sense of belonging, some sense of protection, some sense of hope and future and imagination, let alone the grumbling in my stomach, that person is going to have tremendous sway. And I think the really interesting thing facing our world is who's most vulnerable to radicalization and who can go help them. And that's to me what you've probably seen a thousand different ways.
Sure.
And that always goes back to the question, what will you do with your power, your energy, your resources? Will you build your empire higher, or will you ask who's vulnerable and they need what we have? And that's what I've tried to park myself at, is saying to people, let the one who has 2 coats give to the one who has none. Like, what do you have that the world needs? And not only will you help them, but you'll actually have some meaning and purpose in the process.
This from a guy who had a congregation of 10,000.
Yeah.
And left that congregation to come to Los Angeles to put 200 people in a circle in a comedy club.
And then to have conversations like this.
Yeah.
Come
and have
on.
conversations like this. What's next? How do you make it even more?
Well, I have a podcast called The Robcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always doing new ones. A lot of them are some of these ideas, teachings. Sometimes I interview people. Mostly it's like almost you'd call it teachings or talks or something. So I'm always doing that.
Yeah.
I'm always cooking on the next thing. There's always another book coming. I just turned in the next book. The book after that is pretty much written. So there's always another book, and then there's always a tour of some sort. Right now I'm doing this How to Be Here experience, like these all-day events. So next I'll do Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, then we'll do Paris, London, Belfast, Dublin, Iceland. Then I'll do another U.S. leg this fall. I'm always cooking up the next thing. And then I just debuted this new show at Largo, which is, it's a whole show. It's 82 pictures I've taken on my iPhone. And it's essentially a way of seeing the world. And I was like, this is going to bomb, or this is going to be like, yes.
And how is it?
Oh man, it was, because I love to make things, and there's always this moment when you bring it out or you do it when you're like, I don't know how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And that's the joy to me, is like you just keep leaping. But this thing, so I'll probably, now I have to do some sort of tour surrounding that. And then I just made a film called Everything is Spiritual, about the expanding universe and quantum physics and your heart, and how what we're learning about the nature of the universe and what we know about your experiences of joy, all the connections. So we just put that film, it's an hour and 55 minutes. We just put it on YouTube for free.
Nice.
So I'm endlessly making stuff. That's what we do.
I don't get the feeling you are endlessly making stuff. I really don't. And it's based on my revelation sitting right here at this table in Hill Dog Productions. And it's not that you're making stuff. I feel like you're capturing stuff. And that's really,
that's actually how it feels.
I'm glad that it feels that way to you, because that is, to me, it's as much of a compliment as I could pay you, because I think that and a testament to your success in reaching people, because you're not making it up. You're capturing it.
Yeah.
And you're just helping us all make sense of it.
That does feel
And I just lumped me into us.
nice.
You're helping us make sense of it.
Strong move.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you, Rob.
This is great being with you guys.
Yeah.
I love
Thanks.
it. We
Yeah.
broke it down. Did we break it down?
I think we broke it down.
We broke down a lot of stuff.
Okay,
Here's
good.
what we're going to talk about next. I already know. We're going to talk about Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, I was holding back, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
So next time we'll talk about that.
Okay, good.
Because I love him too, but you
Yes.
already did it. Okay.
Good.
We'll talk about it next time. Thank you. Rob Bell, everybody.
Thanks, Rob.
Great being with you.